Welcome back. If you're just joining us now, we're just in the middle of a conversation with MP for Vegreville-Wainwright, Leon Benoit. We're just talking about the economy and the budget. And one thing that's been talked about around here, at least, especially back here in September, sort of October, was better PR for the oil sands. Is that something that that the government is looking at coming into this budget?
I'm delighted you asked that question because it isn't really a budget item, but there's probably nothing more important to our country, not only to Alberta, than to try to minimize the negative comments made about the oil sands, because most of them, quite frankly, are completely unfair. In Alberta Caucus, we set up a small group about 5 years ago to work with industry in the oil sands to try to head off what we could see would be a problem of bad public relations. And you know, at that time, the big companies in the oil sands didn't want to do anything. They didn't do anything. So then the ducks happened. And then they wanted to do something. So now individuals from the large oil companies themselves are doing an extremely good job. I chair the Natural Resources Committee. We're doing a study on unconventional oil in Canada, so the oil sands, shale gas, offshore drilling, that kind of thing. Okay. And the witnesses from companies are just doing a marvelous job of telling everyone that they are doing a much better job in terms of the environment in the oil sands than they were 30 years ago. And some of the things they're doing with new innovation, new technology, green energy, is just remarkable. For example, 5 years ago, the big issue was how are we going to get enough electricity to run the industry in the oil sands? Now it is, we're producing more electricity than we need. What are we going to do with it? So instead of wasting energy, they're producing electricity with it. So it's pretty remarkable what's happened there, but it is really important that we continue to focus as a government on countering some of the negative, quite incorrect information given from what I call the radical element of the environmental movement. Most environmentalists I really appreciate, and I'm glad they do the job. Some don't seem to be concerned with reality. So but the committee's been very successful on this, and even opposition MPs are catching on.
Do you think it's warranted to spend, you know, a big chunk of money on oil sands PR when, you know, we have maybe other more important issues, healthcare, you know, education, that kind of thing? Why do you think it's still important to spend money on that? I
don't think there's anything more important, because you look at the funding for healthcare in Alberta in particular. Where does it come from? It comes from the oil sands more than anywhere else, and that will continue. So we have to make sure that nothing's happening to hurt that market. So clearly that's one of the reasons you have to continue to focus on that. But the reality is business is doing a much better job. I went on a tour of the oil sands this summer. What really surprised me is the total area that will ever be mined in the oil sands is an area 60 miles by 50 miles. Right now, only a small portion of that is being mined. Now, once the mines are complete, it has to be returned to its natural state. Yep. And finally, the first of the Suncor mines has been returned to its natural state. It got a full stamp of approval. For it to be approved, there has to be 15 years growth of plant growth. And that's a pretty remarkable feat. Whereas you look at, for example, at the Greater Toronto area, an area about 50 miles by 60 miles, that's caused just as much of an impact on the environment, and that'll never be restored to its natural state. So really, you know, I just say that to demonstrate they're doing a good job on the oil sands, and there is more that can be done, and companies are quite prepared to do that.
Now, rumors buzzing about a spring election. What have you heard about the spring election? You think it's going? You think it's not going to get called?
I've heard a lot, but I've heard so much about elections over the past 5 years that I don't listen very much. One thing I have noted is that when there's the most talk about it, it's least likely to happen real soon. So I'm hoping we can just get on, deal with the economy. I really believe an election could be a very harmful interruption in what has been a successful recovery so long.
Is that what you're hearing, like from your constituents?
Well, they don't want an election. They see no need for an election, and they want us to, around here, I think people want our government to continue to manage the economy. In fact, polling across the country shows that Canadians, no matter what party they support politically, trust Prime Minister Harper when it comes to the economy more than any other leader.
Well, you never know. You could be back here campaigning in a couple months, I guess.
I hope not, but it could happen. It could happen.
Well, thank you so much for coming in, Benoit. It's been a pleasure.
I'm delighted, happy to do it.
This has been our conversation with MP for Vegreville-Wainwright, Leon Benoit. Your regional news wrap-up is after the break.